Alright, everyone, we're just waiting on the meeting here now to start. It should be rolling any minute now. Some funky intro music. Could be the new intro for 420 News if she ever comes back. What I was trying to do there, if you're wondering, I was trying to find a fucking old intro for this. Don't know what happened to it. It was on the old soundboard. That soundboard was backed up, and the new soundboard. Piece of audio is gone. I'll find it though. I will find it for sure. So here we go. Where is the meeting gone? What the hell? That page was just sitting there. They better not have started that bloody meeting without me. Yeah, they're still in a private session. Phew. Because that was just playing there the whole time in the bloody background, and the video player just stopped for some reason. Was worried there for a sec we might have lost it. So what's happening out there? How's everybody doing? And Hotbox. And more importantly, who is out there in the Hotbox? If you're watching this afterwards, don't forget to leave a comment on the video. Oh man. So today's meeting as well is about European perspectives on, how do they word it? Your engagement on legal, policy and operational responses to drug use. European perspectives. But you see the list of speakers. Dr. Marta Pinto. Let's have a quick vacant search for this lady, I'd assume. It's terrible to assume one's gender. But here she is, Dr. Marta Pinto, Trinity College, Trinity Biomedical Sciences. Is that the same lady, Marta Pinto Grow? A professor and faculty of psychology and education science at the University of Porto. Oh, so they actually have a press release here. Okay. They don't really advertise these press releases very well, do they? And they don't really keep their bloody time either, do they? The committee will be joined by witnesses Dr. Marta Pinto and Mr. Brendan Hughes, speaking ahead of the meeting committee, Cathaoirleach Deputy Gary Gannon. Last week, the committee engaged with officials from Ireland's criminal justice and public health systems to examine how legislative policy and operational responses to drug use operate in practice, including how they may support
public meeting of the Joint Committee, the second in our module on legal issues, to explore European perspectives on legal policy and operational responses to drug use. I want to welcome our witnesses today. Dr. Marta Pinto, Professor of Faculty of Psychology and Education Sciences of the University of Porto and a researcher specialising in drug use, social vulnerability and public policy. Mr. Brendan Hughes, Principal Scientist on Drug Legislation at the European Union Drugs Agency, who has been working in the field of national drug legislation since 2001. You're both very welcome. Before we begin, a note on privilege, I remind witnesses and members of the long-standing parliamentary practice that you should not criticise or make charges against any person or entity by name or in such a way as to make him or her identifiable or otherwise engage in speech that might be regarded as damaging to the good name of the person or entity. Therefore, if your statements are potentially defamatory in relation to an identifiable person or entity, you will be directed to discontinue your remarks. It's imperative that you comply with any such direction. I'd also like to remind members of the constitutional requirements that in order to participate in public meetings, members must be physically present within the confines of the Leinster House complex. Members of the committee attending remotely must do so from within the precincts of Leinster House. This is due to the constitutional requirement that in order to participate in public meetings, members must be physically present within the confines of the place where Parliament has chosen to sit. In this regard, if any members are partaking via Microsoft Teams prior to making their contribution to the meeting, that you confirm that you are on the grounds of the Leinster House campus. As agreed, witnesses will each have 5 minutes to deliver your opening statements to allow plenty of time for questions and answers, and if necessary, further more detailed information can be sent to the Clerk of the Committee for distribution to members. For our opening statements, I would now like to invite Dr. Pinto to make your opening statement. You're very welcome.
Okay. Good morning. I thank the Chair, Gary Gannon, and also the committee members for your time and for your attention. I'm very happy to be here. As the chair said, I work for the University of Porto, and for nearly 3 decades, I have combined research, clinical practice, outreach intervention and scientific consultancy for policymakers in several countries. I have been closely involved in the development and evaluation of harm reduction and treatment responses in Portugal. I have been following the recent developments of the Ireland's drug policy model, and I would like to acknowledge its strengths. It's evidence-informed, whole of government, health-led rather than punitive, grounded in harm reduction, and importantly, it goes beyond legislative reform alone and seeks to build an integrated network of care with meaningful participation of civil society and a strong data-driven orientation. This approach places Ireland in alignment with the best international practice. I will focus on 3 issues currently at the center of the debate: decriminalization, mandatory treatment, and imprisonment following failed compliance with diversion strategies. First, regarding decriminalization, in 2020, our review of the available scientific literature of decriminalization models worldwide, we found no evidence that decriminalization leads to significant increases in drug use prevalence. It does not appear to expand markets or reduce prices. It tends to reduce arrests for use and possession, lower drug-related crime, reduce infectious disease transmission, increase treatment uptake, and decrease stigma, also raising public acceptance of that legal framework. We updated these findings in 2024, and the newer studies continue to point in the same direction. Comprehensive, human rights-oriented reforms improve public health and reduce incarceration without worsening harmful use indicators. Second, on implementation. Legal reform alone is not enough. How policies are interpreted and applied is crucial. In Portugal, although the law allows for punitive administrative measures, the commissions for the dissuasion of drug addiction operate in practice as early intervention and referral mechanisms. Around 70% of decisions are suspensive, non-pecuniary sanctions predominate, and imprisonment is never applied for non-compliance. The focus is on behavioral modulation, risk assessment, and referral into care, not punishment. The system acts primarily on non-dependent users, many of them socially integrated, functioning as a gateway to support services. Third, and I'm finishing, on mandatory treatment and imprisonment. The available evidence remains limited but relatively consistent. Deprivation of liberty does not show advantages over treatment and may cause harm. Mandatory treatment, including community or outpatient formats, does not demonstrate superiority over voluntary treatment, and any reductions in drug use tend to be modest. Programs that direct individuals into treatment rather than prison may reduce social costs associated with crime, but outcomes depend mainly on the quality, accessibility, and continuity of care, not on coercion itself. Science suggests that systems are most effective when they place individuals within supportive, comprehensive, psychosocial care networks. One of the persistent weaknesses of many systems is that despite recognizing the importance of social determinants, they are often insufficiently addressed in practice. Housing, employment, social networks, stigma, and community integration strongly influence recovery trajectories. Without investment in these contextual dimensions, purely clinical or coercive responses are unlikely to succeed, even after repeated non-compliance. If I were to summarize the core principle learned over decades of work, it would be this. In drug policy, the protagonist should never be the behavior, but the person and her or his context of life. When we shift the focus from the substance to the person's well-being, we create the conditions for trust, engagement, and meaningful change. I look forward to discussing these matters further and also to identify and synthesize the best available research to address any specific questions that the committee or its members may wish to explore scientifically in the next few months. Thank you very much.
Dr. Pinto, thank you very much. Next witness is Mr. Brendan Hughes. You're very welcome.
Good. Thank you to the committee for the invitation to speak today. I've been an analyst of national drug legislation around the EU and broader now for 25 years. I do not have all the answers. And indeed, over that time, the questions, the drugs, and the context often change, sometimes irrespective of what the laws say. We discuss and compare these laws according to the maximum penalty available, which usually means prison sentences, but in about 1/3 of countries in the EU, there's no detention in the law for a first minor use-related offence, like I believe for cannabis in Ireland. There's decreasing support over that time for the threat of severe punishment to dissuade people from using drugs. This has been for different reasons in different countries, whether it's to build trust with those using drugs to encourage them to treatment, or to reduce the number of young people with criminal records, or to reduce police or judicial workload. A clear common objective should help direct policy choices and implementation, as Professor Pinto has just referred to. The responses can be punitive, fine, warning, detention, rehabilitative, like counselling or treatment, or a combination. For best effect, these need to be targeted to each offender's own circumstances. One size does not fit all. The broad trend is to reduce the size of the maximum punishments and or to increase the options or access to them for treatment or counselling. In Croatia, the offender now receives a fine to avoid receiving a criminal record, which would hinder social reintegration. In Austria, they used to send the offender to the judiciary who might refer them to a health service. A few years later, they changed the law. They send the offender directly to the health service. In Norway, police are now authorised to refer to individuals to a municipal advisory unit outside criminal proceedings. There are exceptions to that trend. France reduced the size of the likely punishment but increased the speed and certainty of it by introducing spot fines rather than a court trial. Spain doubled the size of the fine to €600 for a first offence. I have seen countries reducing options for treatment concerned that it looks like a soft option, but they were later changed to broaden treatment access again. So pathways can be customised according to your different aims. If we consider the classic policy cycle, we have the designing or wording of the policy. I limit myself to the laws. The implementing of the policy, and then ideally the outcome and impact of the policy. Now, discussions of impact seem to assume that the law is implemented as it's written, but we see little evidence of imprisonment for drug use in Europe. Often the most common response is a fine. So, does any impact of the law derive from the wording or from the implementation? A simple comparison exercise between penalty changes in the law and cannabis use rates across several countries did not show that changes in penalties influences the behaviour of young adults in the way that many assume. Perhaps people who use drugs do not read the wording of the laws, and they learn about the changes from the media or the friends, both often inaccurate. Perhaps offenders were never deterred by the prison sentence that hardly ever came. Fines were common already, and the new law just aligned closer with prior practice. And on that point, it's interesting that some European countries' legal responses to new psychoactive substances, introduced since 2009, had no penalty for users at all. A few European countries are implementing frameworks to allow residents very limited access to cannabis for recreational purposes, usually by home cultivation or membership of a non-profit growing club. Again, this is for different reasons, and the frameworks vary accordingly. We're working with those countries to ensure that these are scientifically monitored, ideally using common indicators to understand the outcomes. I believe the biggest implementation challenges are for all stakeholders involved, health, law enforcement, the judiciary, the public, to maintain a clear and common understanding of the law and its purpose, yet to allow flexibility in its application. The challenge to run appropriate data collection systems for constant monitoring, possible adjustment, and to resource the increase in health and social responses that are often required. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your contribution. Members, over to yourselves. He wrote or was circulated in advance of the meeting. The first member present on the rota is Senator Lynn Rowan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much to you both. I have a couple of questions. Maybe my first to Mr. Hughes. In relation to, I suppose, the data and statistics that are collected at a domestic level and obviously then feed into the wider picture at the EUDA, I'm just wondering in relation to, I think, what is the current data and methodology in relation to the Health Research Board here in Ireland in catching or capturing, I suppose, the situation for drug use. It's my understanding that the survey in which captures the data, and I'm wondering that how that impacts then policy and decision makings and the picture, the real picture for Ireland. What it does is it excludes, it's an in-home survey, and the person has to be in a private residence to do the survey to capture drug use and type of drug use, etc. in Ireland and its prevalence, which means that it completely excludes anybody who is homeless. It doesn't have English translation, so it excludes migrants and other ethnic minorities, and it excludes the traveller population. So it says quite clearly that these populations are excluded. And I suppose my concern is then that it doesn't actually capture the rates. I actually looked at the percentage as well. I think like below 50% were in urban spaces compared to an 80% response rate in rural areas. And I suppose the type of rural area matters in terms of its concentration of people in any particular space. So I'm just wondering, is the EUDA, what is the input that you have? And are you satisfied with the data that comes from Ireland into the EUDA in terms of those exclusionary points?
Thank you. Those statistics are managed by a colleague of mine rather than myself. I would not dare to presume to give expertise on that, but I am fully aware that every country that reports to us has its own limitations, its own specialities of its surveys. The surveys are by no means identical. And I know that every year there are expert meetings to discuss the differences between them and how comparable they are, how comparable they are not. They're supposed to give a broad indication, but also they're supposed to give a trend over time indication. So provided the survey is carried out in the same way each year, that should give an indication to the country as to how things are changing.
Thank you. I suppose my concern obviously is, and I'm not looking for you to comment on this, is more just to know that for the record is, you know, when we look at where harm is most concentrated and where more targeted responses are needed, I suppose when you have a big massive exclusionary process in terms of how you receive that data, it is obviously concerning in relation to then how you set national policy in that regard. But it's probably something for me to tease out in the future with others. I'm wondering then if maybe Professor Pinto and then Mr. Hughes could also comment on if you are aware, which I'm sure you are, of the proposed adult caution scheme in Ireland, which is an adult caution scheme. It's police-led, and it also means the admitting of an offence in a sense before you are deferred for a potential health appointment. And I suppose I would love your thoughts on that. Whether you see that as a justice-led response to drug use or whether you feel it's a health-led. And I'm just wondering if any of you have any insights or comments.
I would prefer if Professor Hughes would start. I don't know. Thank you for the question. Just, I could start?
Yeah, if you like.
Okay, thank you. Well, I would prefer rather another approach, more comprehensive, once again, not looking at the question by the punitive approach, by the punishment approach, since it makes people who use drugs to back off from the response in general. So I would think that the best approach would be to be a comprehensive one, to be honest. And in general.
Yeah, thank you. Brendan?
I haven't seen the details of that. Is this the one that's been proposed for the last 2-3 years?
Yes.
I was in the Citizens' Assembly, and I remember the chair was emphatic on this point. Adult caution, by its very name, does not necessarily sound like the health-led approach, which I think the Citizens' Assembly was pushing for. That will all depend exactly on how it's implemented. A caution itself could be considered some form of warning, perhaps, and I know we have that in several countries, also in Portugal as well. Who is it given by? What are the implications for the person who receives it? Is there a clear record, and is that record consulted by, future employers or social services? I think the issues are in the details, but we're aware of discussing things like treatment, and I know it's been put forward by many people that a lot of those people who use drugs don't really need any form of treatment or counselling, so that is sometimes considered a blunt instrument also. But to me, it's what are the different options available, and are they suited to each particular person receiving them? You need a wide range of options. Here I hear of one, which is adult caution. I haven't looked under the bonnet to see if that term offers several different forms of treatment, several different forms of response.
So last week, just very briefly in the few seconds I have left, when An Garda Síochána were in front of us, they said that on the first occasion everybody will be sent to a health referral. So that's everybody will be sent to a health referral. So that means you are going to obviously have those large portion of people that do not need health interventions being sent for one, which is obviously quite concerning. I think it's quite concerning to force anybody into a health intervention, by the way, regardless of their the scale of their substance use. But the fact that there would be a lot of people entering into the system that definitely don't need any sort of support. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Deputy Burke, you're next.
Thanks very much, and thank you for your presentations. Can I just ask in relation to, both of you have studied other jurisdictions, and looking at other European jurisdictions where change has occurred, where do you think the change that has occurred has been of most benefit in, I suppose, helping people who are, I suppose, using drugs, or in particular people who may be addicted? Where has the legal change occurred where it has been helpful in real terms? In other words, what country should we be looking at?
I believe it's always quite tempting to... Sorry, should I speak?
Sorry, maybe Maria, do you want to comment first on it?
Okay, so I will start. Well, I don't know if the deputy, thank you for the question, is referring to the modification of the law in the beginning of this century, or to the newest one in 2023.
Recently, what changes occurred, say, over the last 10 years, which has been helpful.
Okay.
I suppose what we're looking at here is what changes we need to make, and I suppose where have the best results been achieved by the change in law in a particular country.
Okay, thank you so much for the clarification. So I would say that decriminalization was a very important dimension of the reform, of the political reform. It's very important because it sends a different perspective addressing drug use to the population, but also because it creates the conditions for people to seek for help without being fear of the sanctions associated with it. Nevertheless, decriminalization was only, in my point of view, a part of the solution, and I call it solution because the country dramatically changed for better since the beginning of the century. Portugal is not recognizable in the indicators regarding drug use. Of course, the commissions for dissuasion of drug dependence were a very important introduction because they are able to work, as I said, as a referral to the care system. Okay. Also, there was a major investment in the creation of an integrated system of care and the introduction of a harm reduction philosophy that was interpreted not only as focused on the health of people using drugs, okay, but also in their well-being and the well-being of their families.
Okay, so
and just one more point, and another very important aspect is that there was an investment on the research related to drug use. So we learned as we put things in practice.
all right. Sorry, Brendan, I'm just wondering, do you want to come in there? You know, you said about, say, for instance, the change in Spain. Spain doubled the size of the fine to €600. But, you know, does that actually provide a solution to a problem? For instance, if the person doesn't pay the fine, what are the consequences of that?
It didn't.
No, sorry, I want Brendan to. Brendan,
I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry.
The consequences, I don't know if we've seen, but also how much to assume that a change took place and assume that changes are due to, changes in, as it were, the number of drug users are due to
you've
that.
outlined about the different changes in different countries over the last, say, 10 years. You know, what I'm saying is, obviously some changes have worked, some changes haven't worked. But I'm saying if you were looking from an Irish point of view, what changes would you like to see happening as regards giving support to people and at the same time making sure that there is adequate protection there as well?
Usually what I tried to say in my opening speech is that changes take place for a reason and different countries have changed for different reasons. So if you want to unblock the police and the court system, which is what happened in a couple of countries, they moved to, I think, cannabis warnings. Portugal did it because it had a horrific heroin problem and a consequent HIV problem. Croatia did it because they found that they were giving too many young people criminal records, which then doesn't help their reintegration afterwards. So it's what is the problem and how to solve it. 10, 15, 20 years ago, Ireland had a very serious heroin problem. Now we know that there's issues of, then it went through a period of NPS problems with all the shops available. And now currently we'll see cocaine as well. So it's a different problem each time. The question is if the system is flexible enough to respond to that.
And do you think that the system in Ireland is flexible enough? As, for instance, we opened a supervised injection facility in Ireland, even though there's been no substantial change in law, but we've happened, and that has been proved to be extremely successful. And I'm just wondering what other changes, having looked at it, would you think would be preferable for Ireland to go down?
Well, right now, I mean, the discussion is here on health-led responses. That's, as I mentioned, that's a general trend through Europe, and I really don't see many countries reversing theirs. There's always a nervousness or even
but I think you also would accept that it
that.
requires substantial investment in order to provide those supports.
Yes, but then the old countries will choose that as opposed to the alternative, which is continuing with their status quo. They find that there's a lot of investment in activities of the police, for example, and also, as mentioned, the issue of the effects on the young people of convictions. So it's always a choice. It's a balance. It's not like there's a perfect solution out there waiting.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
I'm going to move on now to Deputy O'Murraku.
Gurmaiga Cahirlook to Falcher Gilair. Okay. I suppose, well, look, if we, firstly to Brendan Hughes, look, as he said, right, everybody has come up with whatever the general, like, health-led harm reduction policies from a point of view of whatever was the issue, whether it was backlog courts or, you know what I mean, too many young people were getting criminal records. And then also he stated the fact that in an awful lot of cases, laws aren't necessarily enacted as we foresee them and probably not always enforced. But I suppose it is, what I really want to know is, because he spoke about you need a bespoke set of solutions, because obviously, you want to tailor it to every individual, and that's not always absolutely possible. But I'm just wondering what that would look like. I suppose here I'm basically looking for what is the perfect solution, and even if it's only from a legislative point of view. And Dr. Pinto, look, we always talk about the Portuguese model, and we all get the idea, decriminalisation. We know that there is a pushback sometimes from law enforcement saying, sometimes criminals will try and use and abuse, like as they use young people, they will obviously limit the amounts that they carry and all the rest of it. But I suppose what you said is this has absolutely transformed Portugal. So if you could give me the answer in relation to how, why, what worked, what didn't, and I suppose the things to watch for. So if I could go to Brendan first and then Dr. Pinto.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah. I generally create a lot of chaos and confusion anyway. Look, see what you spoke about. At one stage you spoke about having almost a set of solutions to deal with bespoke circumstances that arise for every offence. They're coming from a different place. So you're dealing with people who have huge drug addiction issues. You'll have people who are ensconced within criminal activity. You will have people who are one-offs who just got unlucky, which is obviously very different, and don't necessarily need, the health supports that someone who is a long-term drug user who wants, to seek that sort of help. Anyway, to you.
Certainly. I mean, the broader range of options available to the authorities allows them to tailor in a bespoke way. I sometimes show the statistics of the Portuguese dissuasion commissions basically because they're some of the best kept statistics around Europe. And I emphasize the fact that most of the people going to the commissions just get a provisional suspension of the procedure. You could describe it as a warning, maybe. Some of them do get penalties, whether it's financial penalties or whether it's non-financial penalties. They have the ability to provide banning from certain areas. I don't know whether that's going to be a nightclub district on Saturday night or a local drug dealing area, but they have punitive options available. They have the option to send for treatment or counselling. That doesn't oblige somebody to go through it, and certainly it's not residential. But there are these options. If they don't work, then Professor Pinto can correct me, but I believe the person will then be back again in front of the commissions, and that's where they say, well, that one didn't work, we try again this time. We see if we come up with a different option. The idea is to get them to trust to go to the commissions rather than to fear it and to run away from it. So there are various forms of punishment. There are various forms of rehabilitative solutions. In other countries, it's very common just to say, listen, the response to personal possession of drugs is a fine or a warning or something like that, and that's it. Some don't seem to have the ability to send for any kind of counselling. The next concern certainly is that will there be that kind of counselling available? That's a step further on, but it's to have this broad range of options. Some countries had such a strict law that they said, okay, the second time you appear in front of us or the third time you appear in front of us, we could give you a prison sentence. Well, that sounds like a failure of the first or second time apart from anything else. But it's to have a wide variety of choice rather than one. I think someone, I won't name the country, but one person got sent to prison for growing 7 cannabis plants for a sick relative when the maximum limit in law was 2 or something. The judge couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
The law was so limited.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Those are difficult questions to answer. I would only add some of the possibilities that the commissions for dissuasion have in Portugal. For example, they can ban the exercise of a profession, for example. When people failure to accomplish, they can, for example, impose periodical presentations. But what we, for example, presentations in health services, for example. But what we observe is that, and Dr. Hughes used that expression, is that most countries use various forms of punishment. And I, as a Portuguese professional, the idea that I have is that that's not the logic functioning in Portugal, although the law allows for it. So people working in the commissions are not working in a logic of punishment. They really want to offer a tailored intervention and personalized to help that people. And what we are learning is that people may fail several times, but then at some point of their lives, they adhere and they correspond to the social expectations. So we do not give up on them, even if the work with them is not performed by the commissions. The commissions try to send people to treatment and to healthcare. And then what happens many times, because that's not my job in particular, but the country tries to understand the levels of satisfaction of people in contact with the commissions, and people say that they go there against their will in a first moment, but then they are satisfied with the contact because they could learn how to use drugs with less risks, for example, and how they relate with drugs, and they can prevent that relationship to degrade, for example. So I would say that interpretation, once again, which is comprehensive, which is focused in helping people to improve their lives, is one of our best things, to be honest. Then, as I said before, people who go to the commission are mostly young people, many times sent by the police, but also by other social agents that are worried with the situation. Usually, I would say that in practice, in a quotidian basis, police is not absolutely motivated to canalize people with serious addictions to the commissions, because they already know that the kind of measures being applied, if you wish, are not the most suitable for that kind of profile. So the commission and the police work together to send those people to treatment centers. And also, we count a lot with the harm reduction teams that really do outreach in the places where people use and buy drugs, and do a comprehensive approach, trying to help them however they can, independently of their drug use. And I know this is the principle of action of harm reduction, but many times it's not interpreted as it should in the field, because people don't really accept the drug use, and in Portugal I think that happens. So sometimes we are with people in the streets for 10 years, for 4 years, doing a quotidian basis work, and it seems we are not getting anywhere, and suddenly
It works.
it's improved.
Resource support structures.
I think we'll have a second round, Deputy. Senator Fitzpatrick, you're next.
Kirloch, and thank you, Brendan and Marta, for being here with us today. Depriving liberty, Martha, you say, shows no advantages, and it doesn't. It only compounds the problem for the individual, but also for society. Largely, it is proven not to work. And unfortunately, we have a situation in Ireland where people are incarcerated, they are locked up, and the supports aren't in place. So we know that. We know that's a real problem and we need to fix it. And Brendan, you spoke about, you know, the approach taken in each country depends on what's the problem they're trying to solve. And I guess the problem we're trying to solve at this point in Ireland is different to the problem we were trying to solve 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. We now have a problem where historically it was, you know, marginalised groups of people, largely opioid users. Now we have this general socialisation, social acceptance of, you know, casual drug consumption and abuse. And so we have both, but we have this newer dimension to it, which has a broader general impact, let's say. So our problem isn't an easy one to solve. And I'm hearing you when you talk about the laws and how restrictive laws can be, and while those laws are being written, they're being written with good intent, but the actual practical implications of implementing them is very different. So we're very conscious of that, and we need to try and get it right. Are both of you familiar with the Drug Treatment Court in Dublin? Are either of you familiar with it? No, Brendan?
I looked at it years ago.
Okay, so just briefly, I'll just, it's not a trick question. I asked the question because I'm trying to work out in my mind how that interacts with or compares to, let's say, the dissuasion commissions that you have in Portugal. So we visited recently and we've had the Drugs Treatment Court here to the committee. And very briefly, it is a judge-led court. However, it's not an adversarial court because those who appear at the court are participating in a voluntary capacity. They've been referred to the court because they had a drug-related crime that was non-violent. And do they have to have a second diagnosis of mental illness or I can't remember, but anyway, we can get you the criteria. And at the court, you have the probation services, you have the health services, you have education services, you have the Gardaí, the police enforcers or the law enforcers, and you have the local authority is engaged as well. So it is that kind of wraparound of psychosocial supports, and that is operating. How does that compare with your dissuasion committees? Now, the people, I think one of the differences maybe, Marta, that you said the dissuasion committees are largely dealing with young people and young people who are maybe presenting for the first time with not necessarily a dependency or an addiction, but just a use. So that may be one of the issues. I'm interested to understand the dissuasion committees, the qualifications of those that are operating them and their remit, and more importantly, the resources available to them. Because my question, I guess, to both of you is in trying to achieve a decriminalised, health-led model in Ireland, what are the essential changes that we as a society need to make? What are the essential services and supports that need to be put in place? So I'd like both of your responses to that, please. And Brendan, do you want to go first there? And
I'll try. To me, when I started this work and the Portuguese system was coming on stream, I immediately saw a parallel with the dissuasion commissions and the drug treatment courts. There's the Irish. There were a couple of English, I think, and one or two others, and very famous in North America. I was very quickly told that the Portuguese carefully did not call it a court. That's why they're called dissuasion commissions. They wanted to remove any association with the criminal justice system. And so they did that clearly with the name, with the composition, and also the oversight of the dissuasion commissions, which is by now underneath the Ministry of Health rather than the Ministry of Justice. And this refers back to what I was saying earlier, that the ethos is different. Ministry of Justice, there's an automatic, in a way, there's a belief in somebody's done it again, so it's recidivist, so we have to bring out a stronger punishment. Whereas in the Ministry of Health, if somebody has got sick a second time, you don't bring out an extra punishment, you try a different way of cure. And that very much runs through the Portuguese system. I've checked, I believe the treatment court is similar to others in that it requires a guilty plea first. I have that through a quick search on the web. It's what I remember previously. And so once again, when there's a guilty plea, somebody is under the threat of criminal punishment. That's why they get it. And that's the same for many in North America. And I know that's quite controversial amongst those people who've looked at different drug treatment courts. I'm fully aware that the treatment court's been running for 20, 25 years. And I watched a discussion recently where somebody said, why do we still call it a pilot after that time? And also it's limited by catchment area, isn't it? So it's still the one. But otherwise, in terms of integrated systems, we now have, let me get this right, we have in Romania, they've just changed the law to say referral is now mandatory to their integrated assistance, which is judicial linked with medical and social services. The Norwegians have just changed theirs. They were quite influenced by the Portuguese. It took them a long time, but they got there. So they have referral of individuals to a municipal advisory unit outside of criminal proceedings. And that's a drug advisory unit. So presumably they're set up with similar systems as well. But indeed, it's all this idea of, do you have the capacity and the resources and the ethos to move someone towards a solution to either to their drug problems or to the effects of their drug problems on society. If you look at some beliefs that if they do this behind closed doors and don't bother anybody else, this is where I said some people say maybe not always treatment is necessary. But it's the idea of support and trying to retain somebody in treatment rather than we're waiting for you to fail and then we hit you. Yep. Which from the different versions I've seen over the years often ends up as a self-fulfilling prophecy, or should I say sometimes ends up as a self-fulfilling prophecy, that if there are too many ways to catch somebody, then indeed you will catch someone, and then you haven't achieved the initial objective.
Thank you. I realise I'm out of time.
That's, Professor Pinto, could you be brief in your response? We're just a little bit over time.
Yes, I will try. So I totally agree with what was said. I would highlight that we have commissions for the dissuasion of drug addiction. It's not a commission for the dissuasion of drug use. And I think in symbolic terms, it shows how the spirit and the spirit of the law and of the model is to help and to prevent problems. I would just like to call for the attention.
We can come back at the end and you can give you back some more time if that's okay. So we'll move on to Deputy Graves and we'll come back at the end for that.
Thanks, Chair. Listen, I want to welcome you both here. It's really useful to us to hear models in other countries and your experiences. It's very useful to the work that we'll be doing on the committee and writing our report. I would like to start with you, Marta, if you don't mind. You say that mandatory treatment has very little positive effect, and I would be inclined to agree with you. However, I've met with people when I visit treatment and rehabilitation services, and some of their clients will say, only for bail conditions, early release from jail rehabilitation services and so on. that they wouldn't have escaped the chaos of their addiction. And they've embraced they've embraced their recovery. So I'd just like to know what your thoughts on that are. Is there a case where, in some situations, mandatory treatment works, or would you consider that it's never a good thing?
Thank you. My answer to that question would be, it would depend on the quality of the treatment, on the accessibility, on the tailored form to approach these persons. In an ideal world, if those people were sent in a mandatory regime to a treatment that would be tailored to those persons, I would agree that maybe theoretically adhesion would happen more easily, and it would be useful, but we know this is not the case many times. So since we cannot guarantee that, I would, because for example, we know we have very powerful techniques to do the intervention with people who are not intrinsically motivated to adhere to treatment. But if we could do the kind of interventions that we should, taking in consideration, for example, the social isolation, to promote one of the most difficult things that we have before of us, that is to promote an informal social support network that is disconnected with the previous drug world, for example. If we could really help people in doing this, in getting a meaningful occupation, in helping them to solve the problems in the family, to deal with trauma, and so on. If we could offer this kind of treatments, I would say that maybe the mandatory treatment would open the opportunity for people to engage. But I know that many times, especially in the social reinsertion or social dimension of the interventions, we fail. And I do a lot of research that shows this every time. We have a very clinical approach. And people are, although we acknowledge that social determinants are fundamental, we tend to focus on the individual. And we don't go anywhere else with that. For example, I'm remembering that one of the persons I was listening to very recently was telling me this. I don't know what is wrong with me, but anywhere I go for a job, for a new friend, for an activity, people look at me and know that I have had a past with drugs. I don't know how it happens, but they know just looking at me. And my chances of participating socially are very limited. And this has a huge burden on the possibility of people to adhere to treatment. As we can all understand, one of the things that consensually we understand is that when people's lives are meaningful, drugs get reduce their power of influence. You know what I mean? So ideally, a mandatory treatment could eventually open the door to an ideal treatment, and people would, for example, like it happens many times with the commissions for dissuasion, have a satisfactory experience and would adhere. But I know this is not what happens. So the results of the evidence so far tells us that when we have any result regarding the drug use with mandatory treatment, it's a very modest one. So alternatively, what we should do is to invest in a personalized approach to every people that comes to us, and try over the years, regardless all the failed attempts, to help them whenever we can, how we can, until a moment comes. And if we cannot do whatever we have dreamed to do with that person, for example, if we offer methadone programs, we know that we are going to improve their well-being. We will be contributing, for example, to reduce drug use crime, drug use related crime, and so on. we will prevent many problems for the community. So I would say that we must invest in that dimension, that approach.
And I do agree with you, but I think these were people that are already in, say, the prison system. They see it as an early kind of release, easier way, but they do embrace the services once they have access to them. So where I would have said, no, it's not a good thing, maybe there's in some cases, it might work for some people. Brendan, just a quick question really on the proposal for adult caution, where people must admit the offence of possession of drugs for personal use before they receive a health referral. Do you see that as a health-led approach, or would you see it as a criminal justice approach? This is the proposal in the from the drugs strategy.
I mean, it's sounding like both. Why should they admit an offence before they go towards a health response?
Well, we had witnessing from the Gardaí last week, and they basically said that sometimes they're looking for people that are actually dealing, but they will be caught with a small amount of drugs, which would normally be assumed as for personal use, but they need them to admit that they're in possession before they can follow on for it. And either way, they'll end up that they can charge people, if not for possession, then if not for dealing, then for possession.
Well, if you're looking for a system which in either way you can then charge somebody, then that's not primarily a health-led response, is it? That's primarily a justice-led response with a diversion to a health system.
Yeah. Thank you, Deputy Grace. Just I have a couple of questions myself. Professor Pinto, you have said in your testimony that decriminalisation does not lead to significant drug use increases, and you cite 69 studies. So we've obviously looked at the evidence, and the evidence very clearly captures that sentiment. Oftentimes, it's very difficult to convey that to the public, or people who may, or even some policy developers who may not have the same belief system. Could you elaborate on the studies? There was no increase in drug prevalence. There was no increase in the sale, or the illegal sale of drugs. This is all captured in the evidence.
In the general picture of all the studies, what we see is that sometimes we can observe a small raise in the prevalence of use among adults, but it's temporary. It's after the decriminalization coming to place. In Portugal, very particularly since decriminalization, what we saw is that among young people, drug use has been reduced. And the sense that we get after looking at, there are not 69 studies anymore, there are more because we made a refresh on 2024. But what it seems to me that we can find is that it's like an effect that makes the community become more mature in the relationship with the illicit substances, because we can see that sometimes there's a small but really modest rise in the prevalence of drug use by adults, but it's temporary, and then we tend to see that use along life it starts to reduce and stabilize. So it seems that people contact with drugs to experience, but then it stabilizes, and people don't tend to keep on using them in the following periods of time.
We had a really interesting engagement last week with senior members of our Gardaí police force, and there was a belief that if we removed Section 3, which is the law which criminalises having the drugs on a person's possession, that would see an increase in the sale of drugs, the illegal sale of drugs. Does the evidence capture?
What we saw in the different studies is that prices didn't go lower, which is an indicator. And also what we see is that the police becomes more effective and more efficient. And that might give us the idea that sales are growing. You understand what I mean? If the police will not focus anymore on drug users or people who use drugs, and they start to focus on trafficking activities, of course, we will find more seizures and more amounts of drugs being caught by the police, because they become more effective. And those data in Portugal are very clear. Since decriminalization, the police became more effective in their action for trafficking. Additionally, when I speak with police working in the streets, they always say that. They think that their role should not be dealing with people using drugs. Policemen say they have an health issue. It's not with us. We have to be focused on trafficking. That's our work. I don't know if I could answer.
That was very good. Yeah, no, thank you so much. That was really good. Thank you, Professor Pinto. Brendan, in terms of your own research, so you've captured that there are in different jurisdictions, there will be a lessening of a punitive model, and then at times there will also be an increase in the same jurisdictions, and then potentially a lessening of a punitive model again. Did you track the means by which this was done? Was it through an evidential basis for increasing or renewing sanction, or was it more due to other factors that wasn't captured in evidence but more by perception?
The very simplistic comparison that we were working off is national drug use surveys. So we would check the results before the legal change, after the legal change. They are not done every year in each country, so there might be a few years between them. And that is the change in the law, as I tried to mention, the wording of the law. It's not necessarily the change in how the law was enforced. It's not necessarily the actual penalties or other responses given to the different people using drugs. With that, we don't have a lot of information still around Europe about what is the average penalty actually received. I'm getting increasing data reports. It seems like in many countries it's a fine of some sort. In a few countries it might be suspended prison sentences. But that's in reference to initial concerns about the change in law. I've seen this discussed so many times in different countries. If we change the law, then obviously people will, if we reduce the penalty, clearly people will use more drugs. Well, you might think so, but finally when we track the best evidence we have, that's not the case. And I repeat, that's the change in law. Now, would there be a difference? There would probably be very much difference if it was enforcement of the drug laws, because I would believe people react to their experiences rather than what's written in the statute books. There was a change. I think it was the UK, when they went cannabis class B down to class C, back up to class B. In fact, cannabis use just continued to decline throughout that period. It's very tempting to assume automatically there will be a nice policy lever effect on the population, but that's just not what we saw. In one or two countries, the penalty went, in the UK, the penalty went down, the use went down. In other countries, I'm trying to remember where it was, it might have been Finland or Denmark, the penalty went up and then the use went up. And we see the others as well. It's just, there's not a clear pattern in terms of reacting to the law itself. As for the implementation of the law, that's something that I can't comment on. I think most countries, several countries, don't really have the numbers to understand that.
Okay, thank you, Brendan. Members, we have a room for second round if people wish. Yeah, Senator?
Thank you. Martha, could you send us on those reports? You know, you said the 69, you'd done a review of 69 reports, and then you had updated that again in 2024. I think it'd be really helpful, and thank you both for your commentary on the laws. And it's really interesting, Brendan, to hear you describe there that there isn't a direct correlation. You know, you don't get the result that you think you're going to get. But I actually think that comes down to the fact that you're dealing with humans, you know, and the human predicament is very individual. And laws are not that. Like, laws are made in paper, and so I think it reflects that. Martha, can you explain to me then the dissuasion commissions? If the police are not doing the referral, how is the individual referred to the dissuasion commission? I have to say, I think the term dissuasion commission sounds really sinister. It's Orwellian. Like, I know it's meant to, you know, take away, but it just sends a shiver. But how does an individual get referred to the dissuasion commission? Who does that referral?
Okay, thank you. I will just finish my answer to the previous question, which is connected to this one. Who works in the commissions? Social workers, law professionals, and psychologists, and that's it. Those three discuss the cases, and the approach is to always apply some tools that we have in psychology to address the risks associated to that relationship, which is unique, always unique, between that person and the substances that person uses. And that's funny, because that's one of the things that people like the most. They say that the commission was an opportunity for them to think about their relationship with the drugs. They learned something about themselves in that. So those are the professionals there. And the question is, who makes the referrals? The police makes the referrals. They are not absent of that process, but anyone can do the referral anonymously, for example. A professor in school, a neighbor, for example. And as I said, we deal with, I don't work at the commissions, but the commissions deal a lot with young people. So what the referral
what compels the individual to accept the referral and to act on the referral?
I think there is some pressure, which is a kind of subtle. I would say I don't know profoundly the way commissions function, but people understand that the police is involved. And that's mandatory. They must go to the commission. Although many times, if they don't go, once again, the approach is comprehensive. But the general idea in the population is that if they are sent to go to a commission, they must go, because that has something to do with the police. Did I make it clear?
You did.
Although
you did. It's very interesting, because it's getting to the nub of this issue, I think, because it's funny, Anne, when the Gardaí were in, what I heard was, and I'm not disputing here, this isn't a dispute between us, but we don't still have the actual defined guidelines of how it will operate from the Gardaí. But what I heard from them was that it would be a referral, and that there could be, that there wouldn't be a charge at the time. Now, I need to go back and listen to it and get that clarified. But I think it's important. Like, what you're saying is it's a social pressure. It's a social norm and acceptance that if you're referred to the Dissuasion Commission, it's something you have to do.
The commission, this is something, I never did a study to understand that, but
Okay.
I work in the field for many years, and it's very funny because people are not threatened, I think, but everyone has the sense that they must go.
It's not public information, is it?
The professionals...
Portugal have a civic sanction model that we wouldn't have here, so it's a civic sanction model as opposed to a judicial model.
But it's not public information,
it's not
is it?
public. It may be applied, but as I said, most of the times nothing happens in a punitive sense.
Yeah.
But if you want, this is a very small document. I can send you the law as it is.
Thank you.
And the law says who may do the referrals, and I can send you also the report of 2025 of the ICAD, which gives us all the numbers, who made the referrals, and you also have, I don't know, maybe 6 pages of what can be done and how. I will send you that already translated. It's easy. But besides that study,
that would be excellent.
on
Thank
the
you.
decriminalization, I can send you that
That would
in
be really helpful.
English. In
Thank you.
English, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, Deputy Graves?
Yeah, Brendan, and this ties into exactly what we've just been discussing. In a situation where there's a fine, and for example, if somebody either can't afford to pay it or doesn't pay it, does that then become a criminal issue? Or how is that handled? Okay.
Generally not to my knowledge.
Sorry that you use.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Brendan, would you like to go first?
Thank you. This has applied in other countries. It's not only Portugal. So if somebody can't pay a fine, then you have another issue. And once again, what are you doing? Are you trying to punish them? Or are you trying to encourage them? The Danish have something in their law which says normally the response will be a fine. So I think 20 years ago it was often a warning. The government toughened it a bit. They said normally the response will be a fine, and they used the expression unless social conditions point towards that being inappropriate. And I believe this is available in other laws as well, in general criminal codes or criminal procedural codes, which is you find those people who can afford to pay the fine. If you're going to fine people, particularly those with drug addiction or dependence problems, if you find them when they can't afford to pay the fine, then chances are they're going to go out and steal a few more handbags in order to pay the fine. That's completely self-defeating. So there needs to be some sort of understanding on that. What other response could we give if they can't afford the fine? Do we give some form of social work or social service, for example? Do we give some sort of reporting, whether to a police station or a social centre, some other obligation which is not monetary if they don't have the financial means to pay that? So again, consider who you're dealing with and what's the best way of achieving what you want.
No, thanks very much for that. Yeah, that's really clear.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Morgan? Oh, sorry, it's Professor Pinto. Deputy Morgan.
That's it, I think.
All right, okay, okay. Right, to go back to the conversation that was happening, right, obviously the police force, the Gardaí were in last week, and right, they spoke about, I suppose, that they didn't always enforce, particularly when they were dealing with, you know, young people and one-offs, but what they said about that they didn't want, that they wanted the power of Section 3 was the idea of people that had come to their attention a considerable amount of times who were, let's say, members of criminal gangs and whatever, and it was at least that they had the sanction of arresting them, of getting them done for possession. Look, and this can be pretty imperfect. So I suppose that is their argument, where in fairness, Dr. Pinto, I think you've done a really, really good job of selling the idea of the Portuguese model, even down to the idea that you're saying the police are more effective in how they're dealing with criminal gangs, and the fact is none of us are going to be putting in the sort of resources into, let's say, a police force that would mean there's going to be no criminal gangs. So that's a reality also. But I was very interested when you said, right, obviously the Dissuasion Commission and all the various treatment elements and everything of the Portuguese model. And the idea is not about punishment, but there still are punitive measures that are there. And I get it's a different system and you have civic sanctions. But so it's how would you sell this to the police force, to the Gardaí, in the sense of saying, here are the improvements we have seen. You also review everything, it seems. So what works, is kept. What doesn't has to be changed. And I suppose it is that idea that they will obviously still have to have a focus on disrupting criminals, and sometimes people will use the rules around possession amounts and whatever else. So I suppose, how do you still facilitate the police to police?
Difficult question. There are people in Portugal would be very important to answer those questions, because they work in the police, but at the same time in a friendly style of policing, very proximal. The law changed in 2023 in Portugal, which made that problem more acute, because the quantity, the amount of substances that people brought with them, the law said that people can bring for each substance the amount enough for 10 days of medium personal use. This was the definition, and there was an amount for each type of substance. In 2023, we implemented two main changes in the law. One of them was to decriminalize the use of synthetic substances, and the other was to get out of the law this strict definition on the amount to distinguish personal use from trafficking. For various reasons. One of them was that there was a previous decision of a court that when somebody had more than the amount established in the law, then the judge decided that it was a crime. The law was a bit blurred there. So if the person brings the amount to personal use, but above what is allowed by law, then it's criminal. Then it's a criminal behavior. So those people were criminally charged. The law changed to avoid this kind of problems. So using drugs is never a crime since then, and that is one of the complaints of the police. Now it became even more difficult to distinguish drug use from trafficking, because of course people selling drugs will always say they have that substances for their personal use. Anyway, it already happened before. I did some ethnographies in the field, and I knew some of the strategies that people dealing with drugs that were selling them were using to be considered people using drugs and not people selling drugs, using the law in that sense. So it already happened. It maybe will happen more now. But it's too soon for us to understand what really happened in the field. It's a problem that the police has to solve. I really don't have a very clear idea on that.
No, I get that, and I appreciate the answer, but you also said there were certain sanctions. Like, see the idea that you could actually, someone would not be allowed to be in a particular place, particularly if that was an idea, somewhere that they used as a sales pitch from a drug dealing point of view, that would obviously be useful. But then they're already in with the Dissuasion Commission at that stage.
Yes, the commissions, yeah. The commissions can decide that people, but it's mostly applied to young people.
No, I understand.
For example, you are not allowed to be with that person. You are not allowed to go to those places where drugs are sold, and those kind of prohibitions. Now, with the changes in the law in 2023, it's the accusation, I don't know how you say that in English, the accusation must prove that that person is trafficking, is selling drugs, which did not happen before. So
it's more difficult for the police to prove that.
Police has to prove that. At the same time, for example, with that measure, we are protecting, and I know that in Ireland and in the Irish model, and that's something that I acknowledge as an advantage, you are conscious of the different harms that drug use may have in different places of the country, and you are concerned, for example, with drug use in rural areas. And for example, I've made a study to compare the risks involved in using drugs in urban and rural settings. I can send you that study also. And one of the risks, for example, was the risk in rural settings was the risk to be charged of trafficking, because people don't have access to the illicit substances. So they get the money together and someone goes and buys for everyone, and it's not exactly selling drugs, for example. So, for example, those people were more protected with this law. I don't know if I answered.
that makes
Really
sense.
helpful. That means we're good. Yeah. That brings our meeting to a close. So I just want to take time to thank you, Professor Pinto, for coming here and giving us your expertise. It'll really benefit the committee. And Brendan, thank you so much for joining us online. That was a really interesting committee. Meeting is adjourned until the 19th of March. See you all then, folks. Bye-bye.
Oh, so there we go. That was actually quite a good contribution. A lot of what you would think is common sense been spoken there, especially from the Marta Pinto. So yes, happy days. Hopefully, policymakers actually listen to these things. The last couple of reports, there were good reports, good recommendations within them, and just they didn't matter. And they're doing this committee again, despite the fact that this committee actually sat previously to it, and the Citizens Assembly there, it's fingers crossed, because that contribution there by those two speakers was great. But as I said, Marta Pinto made some great ones. There was a lot of references to the guards who contributed last week. On Garda Síochána, there was two speakers there from last week. And numerous times they got up in arms politely, but no way were they willing to in any way hand over that Section 3, the Misuse of Drugs Act, which allows them to stop and search a person just kind of randomly because they suspect them of being involved in drugs in some way, and as they even admitted that they will put pressure that. I don't think they said they'll put pressure on them, but I suppose they did, that the person they catch with the drugs will give information. They might have something within their phone or whatever. I don't know how. I do kind of have an idea as to how they work, actually. I first-hand experience when I was a young fella, just gone 18, back in the guard station. I told us a good few times. They knew where I was after getting the hash, but they wanted me to admit to them, and they would make this go away as if it never happened. Otherwise I have to go to court and what have you. And it's I don't know what you're speaking about, but that's what they want. They want to make their job easy. But it shouldn't be off the back of people who potentially are vulnerable in the grips of addiction. Thankfully and luckily I wasn't at that time. I was just a young fella experimenting with different substances as you do it at that kind of age. Not everybody, but most people, a good few people. And we're not in need of health interventions. We're not in need of these mandatory treatment referrals and what have you, or fines or any of that other crap. We just need an environment where that curiosity doesn't kill the cat. Because we are an incredibly curious creature, are we not? But yeah, what are other people's thoughts and opinions out there who sat through that? A lot easier to sit through that than some previous meetings. But as I said, let's just hope policymakers listen in to see what's being said, to what was being said there today. I was kind of worried initially that there was only two speakers and the meeting was going to be run short. But no, thankfully not. The two speakers did an absolutely great job. There were some very good questions. Even Colin Burke there asked some good questions, or a good question. He only asked one question, did he not? Did he not? I think he might have skipped out for something else. But he asked the question as to what European countries made changes that Ireland should be looking to. And I thought that was handled quite well by Brendan Hughes, wasn't it? He didn't look in at any specific drug, but he did talk about good changes that were made there. He really kind of pointed out the fact that a health-led approach doesn't need the guards involved, the justice system involved in the way in which they're looking at doing here in Ireland, which is, you get caught with drugs, you have to admit an offence, and then you can get referred. So your first point of contact is with the justice system, which he points out is that's not health-led. Health-led means it's the health system is the first point of contact, and then the justice system shouldn't have a role, as the lady from Portugal pointed out. The dissuasion committee that they have over there, she's an Orwellian name. Orwellian, seriously, dissuasion. Is that truly Orwellian when you look at what it actually is and the effort that they made to differentiate it from the justice system? To be fair, I thought that was a much better name, because it's not dissuading them from drug use, it's really dissuading them from problematic drug use, from addiction, because they're taking a health-led approach. Health-led approach means that they're really focused in on problematic drug use, problematic addiction. They allow personal drug possession, they allow a personal amount of drugs for a person, an adult, who is a consensual consumer of drugs. Unfortunately, they don't have it perfect over there. They don't have the market to control it. The supply is still in the criminals for the most part. But it's just much better. It's just a much better approach that they're taking, that it is health-led, truly a health-led approach. So yeah, as I say, hopefully policymakers look at that. So do share it around, make clips out of it if people need to, because there was some very good common sense things being said there that unfortunately aren't common sense. So the more that we can get that out to people, the better. I really should get my finger out and start making more of those clips and getting them out there and sharing them and all of that stuff, but just, it's hard. I haven't got much space inside a place at the moment, and to get the time is quite difficult. Happy to be able to get the time to come out here and do this on a Thursday. A couple of days there I had to miss out and being able to sit here and kind of give this little bit of a breakdown of it afterwards, and a bit of crack with the hot box. But you all seem to be quiet out there today. So anything else to say? I did actually, yes I did. I see the mirror. I don't know if you have any feelings about this fucking paper. Oh, boom. Boom, so there we go, pull this up on screen. So I found this over on Facebook. It was shared with me there from a friend, so it was up on the mirror. It was about, pop this down there. It was about a 17-year-old who was kidnapped and gruesomely dismembered. You remember Cian Mulready Woods? Cian Mulready Woods, if you don't remember, he was decapitated because of a drugs turf war that was going on above there in Drogheda. Absolutely barbaric. It was in 2020. He was only, what age was he again? 17 years old, actually, as I first mentioned. They go on here and in the mirror talking about this lad, Robbie Lawler. They throw out another couple of names, but these are people who are known within the area. These are drug gangs. These are people who the Gardaí knew about. They were in control of the drug supply. But the same people who want to hold on to the Section 3 so they can go after the likes of myself and yourself out there who have personal possession of cannabis to get at the drug dealers. They know about these people, but they still can't stop them. They decapitate people. There's public bloody shootings, arson attacks. Let's get real. The guards aren't stopping this. Prohibition doesn't work, and we've seen it time and time again. We were re-experiencing it now for the last bloody 50 years. But yeah, that popped back up because the mother shared her what she said, the last words that she had heard from Keane before he had died. So she talks about prior to the disappearance of Keane, he rang his mother, informing her that he would be home late and requesting she leave money out for the taxi. He had become entangled in operating as a drugs courier for a local criminal organisation who was under strict orders to return before nightfall and had been following these instructions, according to the Irish Independent. At the point of his death, he was released on licence following a conviction for intimidating a local mother regarding her child's drug debts owed to the gang. Like, he should have been locked up. He shouldn't even been out and getting decapitated. You know, if the guards were effective at what they were doing, you know, if the Section 3 keeping that for them actually worked, he would have been locked up. He was intimidating a mother about a drugs debt for a child. Come on, in fairness, like, we've laws out there against this stuff. Enforce those laws. Do you know, they keep talking about drug debt intimidation as if it's something different to just intimidating, threatening a person, threatening grievous bodily harm. There's laws out there these people are bloody breaking. He was under licence already. He was under licence for being released for that. Yeah, he was released on a licence following a conviction for it. So they did convict him of that, but still he was released. He was out there. He shouldn't have been if they were any good at what they were bloody doing, because he went straight back out, getting involved with the drug dealers. It's understood he was lured. It's understood that Lawler, killed Keane because he believed the teenager was implicated in the fatal shooting of his brother-in-law Richie Carberry at his home in November 2019. Gardaí believed that Lawler progressed the torture in the team despite originally claiming he would merely deliver a punishment beating over a trivial drugs debt. So it's insane that they want the drugs to continue to be in control of these fucking lunatics. An insider told the Irish Sun Lawler was obsessed with Mulready Woods and was determined to take his life, because he was convinced he played a major role in Carberry's death. He took his property for violence to another level when he dismembered the teenager's remains and then taunted his enemies about it. The merciless 36-year-old had been connected to multiple killings and accumulated hundreds of criminal records before his fatal shooting. Last December, he left court without charges after being acquitted of attempted murder of the murder of his former partner's new boyfriend. Mere weeks following his acquittal on the attempted murder allegations, he was attacked outside a fitness centre by someone associated with one of his supposed murder victims. Lawler's gym belongings were stolen, and his adversaries posted pictures of themselves sporting his flip-flops. And he didn't like this, and he killed someone apparently, well, obviously the murder of his brother-in-law, whatever the crack was up there, was a part of it too. But he says it's commonly understood that Keane was present during the incident, and enraged Lawler reportedly planned retaliation. So there was kind of a straw that broke the camel's back, if you will. Amongst the images circulated following Keane's murder was one of them bearing the sinister caption, "Won't be robbing a man's flip-flops again." It's mad to think how anybody can think the prohibition of drugs is in any way good for society when these are the kind of people that it empowers. It's the underworld, it's the black market. Who really thrives within that? It's people who are fucking ruthless, as I say, merciless. Those are the people who really rise to the top. Just kind of what you need to be. You look at some of the movies there and stuff, it's it's not something that's not known. These movies are well watched. What was Jesus? There was one there recently, Snowfall, that we watched. It wasn't a movie; it was a TV show, but it was a good one. But it really shows the ruthlessness that's needed to thrive within that criminal underworld of the drugs. Criminal underworld, the prohibited drugs criminal underworld. In February 23, local criminal Paul Crosby received a 10-year prison sentence for his involvement in Keane's slaying, while his accomplice Jerry Rocky Cruz was handed 7 years imprisonment. These lads have their own nicknames. What was the other lad? There was Mr. Flashy, wasn't there? One of them, Mr. Flashy. Can't remember who that was, but that was another one of them. Mad, like they're playing up to it, even calling them that. We should call them what they are. Like, if these are rootless criminals, we shouldn't be giving them their nickname. Like, no, we shouldn't be giving them that pleasure. But we do. And that plays into it then, because the lads coming up behind them want to be known as, you know, the next fella who does this or that, but I'm not going to get caught by. Nah. And a third individual, Gerard Jed McKenna, admitted to cleaning up and disposing of evidence from the location. Yuck, boys, like, come on. Oh, God, can you even imagine? Like, God, I butchered some animals before, like, cut up some meat. Like, we used to fucking hunt rabbits before, and God, man, that was kind of, you do it, like, whatever. Done a lot of cooking there recently. Got like fucking legs of a lamb and bits like that. It's like, how could you do that to a person? God, like, I don't know. An heartbreaking victim impact statement read out for the Keen's grief-stricken Mum Elizabeth. She said, "No one could imagine the darkness and sadistic evil in our country. I can hear them calling, 'Ma'am, ma'am,' and the haunting nightmares live with us forever. Live forever with us. To lose my child, my son, my baby in a most inhumane, barbaric death is shocking." Adding that a piece of her died as well. I couldn't protect him. Do you know? And that was something fucking took the nation at the time. Like, it was really spoken about. But again, the response to it was, "Oh, we're going to be hard on these criminals." But what have they done? They've done nothing. Those criminals are all still at large. They might have took these lads out that were involved specifically with that, who done it that specifically. But all they done is just, like, removed one person in the hierarchy, and now the next fella comes up. And do you know what happens for the next fella? For him to come up, quite often he has to be more ruthless than the people they took out, because there's going to be a bit of a scrap there now for that, like, quite a lot of the time in a hierarchy. That's how it works. Fuck, man. Again, common sense, it's just not that common, unfortunately, and it's just heartbreaking that it comes to cost lives. Do you know, people like this, it's like, alright, that's the extreme. But day to day, there's people out there needlessly suffering under the prohibition of drugs, people who could be getting help, vulnerable people who could be getting help that aren't, vulnerable people that are being taken advantage of when they shouldn't be, all because, like, you know, we've seen that meeting there and the lads sitting around, their policymakers sitting around, and for the last couple of weeks, some of them asking the most dim-witted questions, and they're doing so, like, when there was already reports, suggestions, you know, recommendations made, and they've done nothing on them. They've done nothing. Instead, what they've done on them, to be fair, they've done something. They established a new committee to talk about the recommendations that they were already made. Like, you couldn't make this shit up. Like, I wish I was making it up. I really effing do, but I'm not. Right. Yep. Hi, Martin. What's the timeline for the end of this committee and an actual action being taken on this? Exactly. That's pretty much what I'm just getting frustrated about an action. God forbid the next action they're going to take is establish some new bloody committee thing to have a look at the bloody recommendations of this one, or I hope to God not. Hopefully, I think this is going to be out by June. The report should be published by June, they're saying, before the summer recess, they were saying. The draft thing, that's another thing actually that I should bring up. Give me 1 sec there now, I'll find this. Where's the easiest one to find? Maybe over on WhatsApp, I think. Should have pinned it actually on our Telegram group. But what was that? The National Drug Strategy. It was a draft National Drug Strategy that was released there about a week or two ago. Well, they've opened up now the window for suggestions, recommendations, to be put in from the public. Fuck's sake, of course, this will take forever then to load. So there's a link that you can follow and you can submit your own recommendations. So I would highly recommend people to make their suggestions. This is an opportunity for you to have your say on our national drug legislation. 1 sec now, as I There we go. I know I'd find it here. Get that open. Bing, bam, boom. Back we go. Boggs says to a child at that. Yeah, man, he was pretty much a child, you know, and he was involved for a while. We're talking about Keane Mulready Woods there. It was horrific, it really was, and it was bloody really frustrating at the time that the response was to be harder on crime when, like, it was already criminal, like, drugs and all of that. We already had in place a minimum mandatory 10-year sentence, I believe. I do believe we had that at that time. I think that was 2013 that came in, and that happened in 2014, was it not? Forgive me, fucking dates and numbers can be all over the place at times, but again, we already had laws. We couldn't be any harder, really. Bringing the death sentence really was the next thing for drug dealing, and even at that doesn't work. There's places where they have the death sentence, and people, guess what? They still bring traffic, deal, whatever, drugs. You know, it still happens. Although I will say, when I went to Thailand the first time, that actually did encourage me to go on an abstinence, because you were kind of like worried about getting banged up. You've seen that banged up abroad before it was kind of popular, and no, Thailand was a no-go to getting banged up over there anyway, for sure. But also we went there for Thai boxing training, so I was just like, yeah, good an excuse to take an abstinence and a little bit of a break, tolerance break. Jesus, the stop over in Amsterdam on the way home effed me up, I will say that. Tolerance was not there. Yup says he's seen the recommendations. Yeah, I've seen them as well. It's terrible, it really is. The national draft of the drug strategy, if that's what you're talking about, the draft is freaking terrible. But to be honest, I'm cautious when filling it out, as the terminology can potentially be misleading, like how they fix the vote by creating a new definition of words. I'm unsure if the same definitions apply. Well, make a contribution to this. Don't be worried too much. I think these are all like not like it doesn't have to be. What would you say? Like doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to be given fucking references and the whole lot. Like, share your own personal views, opinions, beliefs on this draft. Yeah, if that's what you're talking about. But right, draft and national drug strategy. It's available to read for anybody. Consultation is open. It says here the purpose, on how to participate, and what we will do with your response. So, boy, is it long? No, it's not too long. What we want to hear from you: the Minister of State, Wellbeing and National Drug Strategy, Jennifer Murnane O'Connor, TD, has launched a public consultation on the draft National Drug Strategy. The Minister recognises that Ireland's response to drug use requires a comprehensive whole-of-society approach, and is now seeking the views of the public, including those who lived and living experience of drug use, along with service providers, charities, advocacy groups and public representatives, so they are fully considered in the final strategy. This will help ensure that the strategy reflects the current landscape, as well as the dynamic of and ever-changing nature of problem drug use. Problem drug and alcohol use. I hate they separate that, actually. I almost finished it without the alcohol there. Problem drug use. That's what it should fucking be like. Why like throw in alcohol every time? But look, let's not fret. The purpose here says illicit drugs are a major health and safety issue across Europe and in Ireland. Drug use now happens across all parts of Irish society, and more people are using several substances at once, especially cocaine, alcohol and newer synthetic drugs. Like, if you went that really when it comes to cannabis, like when you sit down and have a few talks of cannabis, it's normally just cannabis you use. It's like, is it really a polydrug use? Yeah, you'd probably have a few drinks, alright, fair enough. That's probably one as well. But yeah, cocaine and alcohol, that's problematic because of that, what's it called, acetylene or something like that, that secondary compound that gets created when it's metabolized. Both of these are metabolized in the liver together, which is fucking highly toxic, apparently. Well, not apparently, it is highly toxic. So this creates new challenges, they say, for healthcare and policy. The programme for government, Securing Ireland's Future, 25, commits to a health-led approach to drug use. But again, as just pointed out there, within that fucking health committee, joint drug use committee, the approach that they're taking is not health-led at all. The next national drug strategy envisages a society where the harms of drug and alcohol use are minimised for individuals, children, families and communities, and where health and social care for those affected is high quality, accessible, equitable, person-centred, integrated and recovery orientated. So that's a lot. That is a lot. And as a person who lived and currently living through this, it's very few of those currently. Minimises for individual. It hasn't. It's made it more difficult for me as an individual. It's made it more difficult, it says here, for children, my family, because they're trying to take money out of my pocket for my supposed addiction, problematic drug use, when it's not. It doesn't need to be. My drug use isn't problematic. Being criminalised for it, being dragged through the justice system has been incredibly and highly is problematic. Still is, and it has hurt me, my family, my jaw. But right, let's just get back to this. Sorry. This strategy will impact the lives of numerous individuals, families and communities throughout the country. Yeah, because having body parts just tossed out in your community is an effective part of a drug strategy. The new strategy upholds the right to health, recognising that people who use drugs or alcohol, again, in a harmful way, are entitled to access healthcare services and to be supported in the recovery journey, regardless of social background or location. It outlines 5 strategic pillars: protection from harm, provisions of high-quality treatment services, promotion of recovery, prioritisation of health supports over criminal sanctions, and preparedness for global drug threats. These pillars will be advanced through 30 specific actions over the first 2 years, with a new set of actions proposed for the remaining 2 years of the strategy. Extensive consultation has taken place on the development of the strategy, including the Citizens' Assembly on drug use and a series of stakeholder events. Again, just remember, the Citizens' Assembly didn't include any members of the medical cannabis consuming community. So medical cannabis patients were not allowed present at that, nor were there any conversations about cannabis legalisation actually allowed to take part, I believe. At least I don't remember there being any extensive conversation on that anyway. And that's their claim here, extensive. There were no representatives from the drug using community either, if you were to think about it, because why were members of groups like Crown, the Cannabis Activist Alliance, these were 2 very active groups back at that time. But it says here now, a public consultation has now taken place in order to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to submit their views on the draft National Drug Strategy 26 to 29. The public consultation will run for 6 weeks until the 10th of April 2026. So again, how to participate: please click on the View Consultation link below it to take part. You will be redirected to the EU survey site, where you will be given further instructions on how to complete the survey. What we will do with your response: we intend to publish a summary report outlining the responses received and the issues raised. No personal information will be published. So there you go. That's pretty much it. You've clicked links, follow along. That's about as much as I can read through that. Let's quickly jump back there to the hot box, see what's being said, and we'll begin to wrap this up until I believe he said the next meeting was next week. Forgive me, I should have took note of that. No, that's not what I was trying to say. I meant how when they asked for, do you agree with a health-led approach? I want decriminalisation, not people to be made attend hospital for having an odd J. Yeah, exactly. That's what they were kind of getting at there throughout that meeting. The contributors, the speakers, they were pointing out that if the first point of contact is with the justice system, then that is not health-led in the approach. So I think they really hit the nail on the head on that. But I just really hope that policymakers acknowledge that they fucking hit that one on the head. Like, if you're calling your approach a health-led approach, it really shouldn't have the guards being the first point of contact. I love weed. If that's a sickness, I'm sick as fuck. Exactly. You know, there's so many people out there who are non-problematic drug users, you know. How many people go around with a T-shirt with a pint of beer, but they work a 5-day a week, they're fucking perfect contributors to their family, you know, they're not problematic within society, they're a positive contributor to society, and we separate them. Alcohol. But when it comes to drugs, man, do you know what I mean? You simply just consuming it is seen to be problematic by these policymakers for some reason. I can't understand it. Is it the fact that they do separate it out? If they included alcohol within that drugs, would that make it easier for them to do it? To kind of see, like, oh, same. Again, a little bit of time in Thailand. But yeah, fucking, would that not make it easier if drugs and alcohol were the same thing? They didn't separate them out, because then they would realise, oh yeah, well, I can go down to the Dial bar and have a few fucking subsidised pints, and not be seen as an addict. It's not problematic. I'll go down and have 1 or 2, maybe 3 or 4, 5 or 6, because do you know, why not? It's only a drink. It's not a drug. Maybe then we'll see, like, Luke McFlanagan there, he's not as bad actually. Yeah, he likes the old bit of doobie, but you know, he's not bad. He's holds down his job. He showed up, he did work to get elected, all of that stuff. Like, he's not some dude who's just sitting at home, lazing about, doing nothing. He's not that typical, stereotypical druggie, if you will, stoner. But yeah, let's just fucking be optimistic for the future. Get your fingers out, get out there and make your contribution to this public consultation on the national drug strategy. Please, everybody, get in there, have your say. Now's your time to speak up. You're doing so anonymously as well. Your name, your details, none of that stuff is going to be published. It's, you know, get out there, have your bloody say. If you feel passionate about this, if you feel you've been wronged by being labelled, stigmatised, you know, as a criminal, for your enjoyment of a J. If you just like enjoying a J on the weekend, you like it on a Friday, Saturday night, you know, just to loosen out, cup of tea, a J, a movie, bit of time relaxing with the missus or the mister or the non-binary or the two-spirit, is it? There's all those other ones as well. But yeah, you know, whatever floats your boat, man, you should be able to do that. You shouldn't be seen stigmatised in any way, shape or bloody form for that, you know. If you like to do it fucking 7 nights a week, you know, you work a hard job, you come back on a Monday night, you should be able to have your doobie if that's the case. You get up the next morning and you go to work, and you know, if your job is a bloody truck driver, you shouldn't be discriminated against again because of the pharmacology of the drug you're consuming. You consume cannabis, it's active for a period of time, but it's present for a lot longer. So you're intoxicated, if you will, under the influence for a period of time. And it's in your system for much longer than that, and you're criminalised again, discriminated against again, if that's your job. I know one of the lads, you know, shout out to Cork Boy, he got a job as a postman, and he had to give up the job, he had to give up the ganj. He had to take a break from it, step back from it, despite the fact that it benefited him. He was using it in a therapeutic, medicinal way. And it's ridiculous. It is. It's a form of discrimination. This guy's having to suffer needlessly. He's been forced. His hands have been joined. He's been forced, coerced into having to give this up. Something that's not actually been a problem in his life, because he's unfair. He's literally unfair. You know. Like, if you think about it, we're a country where so many people are coming here now seeking asylum, running away unfair from another country because they're being persecuted there for things. Like, this guy got a run now from this country where he's been a positive, productive contributor to that society, because he's in fear of our government, in fear of being persecuted here for something that, you know, you only get in a couple of hours of a plane flight, 2-3 hours of a flight to a couple of places. You've Spain, you've Germany, you've got Luxembourg, Switzerland, A couple of them there I've listed where you wouldn't be seen to be a criminal for your use of cannabis, and some of them they actually would accommodate for your medicinal therapeutic needs. That's fucking insanity, man. It's ludicrous. I genuinely can't just understand it. Normies. Yeah, the Bogs are saying the roadside drug test ruined my driving experience. Man, I know a couple of people now who've had their licenses taken off them. One or two of them now actually who had needed that for their job. They weren't career drivers. They needed it to get to their job, which is insane. It's just lousy. It's shite. I won't go into some of the other stuff that's going on out there. You know, you see some fucking this two-tier justice system that's out there at the moment. But you see some judges out there and they really want to go hard they want to be seen to be going hard on drug users and cannabis growers, drug dealers. It's mad, man. They're supposed to have impartiality when you go before a judge. But if a judge wants to be seen to be hard on drugs, if they're expressing these dislikes, you know, these personal expressions, like, is that really impartiality? Like, you know, when you see a more egregious crime, more serious crime that certainly warrants more of a harsher punishment, longer term imprisonment, and they're getting off with slaps on the wrists, you know, these child abuse images, these fucking child abusers. God, man. God. But I can understand why people would be infuriated and want to get out there and scream, pull their fucking hair out. But no, we have to be productive. And one of the ways we can be productive is this fucking way up here, this national drug strategy thing. Contribute, have your bloody say. Can't stress it anymore how important it actually is to be getting your say into this thing. Who knows, they might actually bloody listen, please God. And then the report coming from the committee, the Oireachtas Joint Drugs Use Committee, please God, they actually put those two things together and come up with a national drug strategy that actually reflects the needs of the nation, which is the regulation of cannabis, that's for sure. There's a massive amount of us out there who need that. But also the decriminalisation of all drugs, access to effective drug treatment, drug addiction services, access to a clean drug supply, removal of these criminals who think beheading, dismemberment and all of that of fucking kids, teenagers is allowable, appropriate. Oh God. But yeah, I'll say it one more time. The National Drug Strategy, public consultation, have your say. Make sure you get your ass up off wherever it is and get in front of your computer, get the finger out, type it up and contribute. Please, please. Boom. So nice one, everybody. John O'Regan, what's happening, my man? Thanks again, Martin. Not a bother at all, John. It's been quite a while, man. We haven't crossed paths in quite a while. Hopefully all is good with yourself. If you ever find yourself down in the real capital, drop me a message. More than happy to meet up for a tea if I'm free. And the road full of legal drivers that can't drive. Man, don't get it. Oh, don't get me started. I can't drive over my epilepsy now at the moment. But I've been a passenger there quite often. Out daily during like fucking road job time hours. Oh man, the driving is getting terrible. Imagine being able to get up in the morning and tip out for a coffee and a J. Wouldn't that be nice? It would. It really would. Just people would complain and, oh, I don't like the smell of cannabis and what have you. You know, oh, I don't want to be getting stoned. Like that's another misconception. Like that a person is going to get stoned from like secondhand smoke out in the air. Very unlikely to be fair. Fair enough, if you're walking behind a person who's smoking a doob in front of you and it's blown right back to you and you stand there for the whole duration of it, I can understand that too. But if a person's kind of like sitting down outside and you're walking past the smoking area, you're most likely not going to get stoned. And even if you're sitting there for the whole duration, you're on a table next to them, you're most likely probably not going to get stoned, are you? Like, I'd say it'd be fairly hard to get stoned on secondhand smoke. You'd really want to be in a hot box, would you not? Hey, what do people think out there? Like, how much secondhand smoke would you need to be getting, like, stoned? Because I think the transfer rate when you inhale is quite rapid. Like, that's why you don't really need to hold in the smoke when you take an inhalation, because once it gets into the lungs, the transportation of the compounds from the smoke to the blood through the lungs is very rapid, and like it's a point of diminishing returns. Man, this fucking epilepsy medication they have me on there lately is killing me. The ability to recall terms and stuff like that, simple little it's annoying. But yeah, it's point of diminishing returns. Holding the smoke, it's not really necessary. Take it in, inhale, big inhale, blow it out, and you're going to be getting like fairly high amount of that. So what you're blowing out actually doesn't contain a whole lot of active compounds, you know. There really isn't. Like, if I was to ask, actually, let's use fucking AI for the crack. Let's just ask it, like, what percent of active THC remains in, how would you say, exhaled. See what I mean? I got stuck for that word. Like, I think it inhaled, and I was like, what's the exhale? Oh, I couldn't think of it, letting it out. Exhaled. It was smoke. In a typical amount of. So what percent of active THC remains in a typical amount of exhaled cannabis smoke? Right, let's pop that up there if you can see the answer as she comes in. So what's this got to say? So when cannabis is smoked, only a small fraction of the original THC is actually exhaled by the user. Most of the THC is either absorbed by the lungs or destroyed by heat, and it's a process called pyrolysis, or lost as side stream smoke from the burning tip. So there you go. So here, if you want a breakdown of it, the life cycle of THC in a typical cannabis cigarette is generally broken down as follows. And this is referenceable to the ScienceDirect.com. 23 to 30% is destroyed by pyrolysis. So again, vapors, dry herb vapes. You know, this is a reason for dry herb vapes. You don't want to be losing any of that goodness through pyrolysis, but again, as a bong hitter, hypocrite. 20 to 37% is delivered to the user as mainstream smoke. 33 to 57% is lost to the environment as a side stream smoke from the burning end. So this is something, you know, that a bong hit is better for, because if you get the whole bowl in one, you don't have that side stream, so you're getting more delivered to the user. Boom, there you go. So exhale percentage, so of the 20 to 37% that actually enters the user's lung, the vast majority is absorbed quickly into the bloodstream. Absorption rate, inhaled THC viability, Jesus man, get another bottle of water in here, cotton mouth kicking in. Inhaled THC bioavailability typically ranges from 10% to 35% and sometimes up to 50% depending on the puff and volume and breath holding. Exhaled amount, researchers indicate that the user exhales only a tiny amount of the THC they originally inhaled. Example case in one computer simulated study of cannabis vaping, the amount of THC actually exhaled was estimated at roughly 0.1 milligrams per puff, even when much larger amounts were originally inhaled. Factors influencing retention. No, this is something I was talking about. Let's see if they call me out. Inhalation depth. So I did say take a big hit. Deeper breaths allow for more contact with the lung surface area, increase in absorption. So breath holding, while often debated, holding the breath longer can increase the deposition of particles in the lungs, potentially reducing the amount of THC eventually exhaled. So puff profile. So what they were saying there is potentially, yes, there is, but deposition of particles in the lung. So yeah, you don't want those particles. This is kind of what they were saying. There's a point of diminishing returns where the benefit, what's the opposite of benefit now? See, where the negatives outweigh the positives. Let's just put it that way. So you don't want the deposition of those particles. That's why they say like holding it in actually is kind of, it's not really great. You do get a bit more, but it's more about the deeper breath. That's kind of what they're saying. Smaller hits, deeper breaths. That's the way to go. The puff profile, the volume of the puff and the flow rate of exhalation significantly impacts how much THC is emitted back into the air. So there you go. There we go. Science. Science. Where's your man there from fucking Breaking Bad? Alright, let's get this up anyway, because we've got this packed here. Been kind of waffling on for a little bit. Kind of went down a wormhole or two, but it was all irrelevant to what we were talking about. One sec, we'll ask one more question. How does this compare, Jesus man, to... Let's compare to dry herb vapes. See, there we go, guys. This is not sponsored by anybody. If any dry herb vaporizer wants to sponsor, get in touch. Martin's World. But dry herb vaporizing is significantly more efficient at delivering THC to your stream than smoking, largely because it avoids the destructive heat of combustion. While smokers may exhale slightly more visible smoke, vapors actually absorb a higher percentage of THC they inhale. So, there you go, man. Science. THC loss to heat smoke destroys 23 to 30%, as we previously discussed. And in contrast, vaporizers operate at a lower temperature, preserving nearly 100% of the cannabinoids, especially those terps. You know, if you get those lower heat vapes where you can control. I like to use the venti, and when you turn it on as it's going up through the temperature, I like to take those earlier hits as it's releasing some of those much more sensitive terpenes and other compounds that contribute to the flavour of the hit. So there is a lot of benefit to it. But there's something about the bong hit, like I just can't get it. It's convenient. You don't have to turn it on. You don't have to wait. You don't have to charge it. Yeah, the positives outweigh the negatives. I don't know, it's debatable. Mainstream delivery vaporizers deliver 36 to 61% of the original THC in the herb to the user. Traditional smoking only delivers about 20 to 37%. That's a big difference, you know. 36 to 61. And even if you only get that 36, guess what? There's still 64% remaining in the herb, which you can collect and use for making like the butter, olive oil, you know, extracts to be used when cooking. Bioavailability, the overall bioavailability, how much enters your bloodstream, is higher with vaporizing. Smoking 25 to 30, vaporizing 30 to 60. That's a big difference, you know what I mean? Big difference. So there you go. Let you dive into that if you want more. AI can be fun, especially when you're kind of having a bowl or two. You go down some rabbit holes with the bloody thing. Anybody out there a fan of like having a bowl, a cup of tea, and sitting down and messing around with AI? You sometimes get these random like thoughts. You might be just like out walking the dogs or something, and a random thought might come in, and you might think like a silly bloody question, and you're like, draw down the eye and quickly get the answer, you know. I think of some silly ones. I can't really think of them now off the top of my head, like, but you know, like while I was watching that one there, I was able to just bang in how many people have actually got those fines in Spain since the fine was doubled, and it's not that many. I think there was like 2 million people since 2015. The change came in 2024, I think, or something like that. So 2 million over that period of time is nothing really, like, given the size of Spain. So she is a handy tool, but interesting to see where what role it's going to play for humans in the future. A lot of people worried. All I can say is I don't have control over it, so I try not to worry about things I don't have control over. Enough shit in life going to stress you out. But yeah, it's been good. It's been a good crack chatting with you all. Anyway, I'm going to hit this bong. Anybody want to get a final word in there? Belt away, the hot box is open for another couple of seconds. Do you know, as I think about her, actually, I think I just remembered where that fucking bit of my bob was for the intro. Countdown intro. Boom. Was it here? I think I named it something else. I don't think I called it intro. I think I called it fucking bong it, did I? No. There's too much crap here within this. The porn armies don't like the smell laugh loud, and the smell of beer is lovely. Yeah, living near the Heineken factory for years, you kind of get used to it, and I kind of like it now, to be fair. The smell of the beer being made out of the Heineken factory. Even down on the docks there, when some of the ingredients are like arriving in for it, the smell of those is quite powerful. That's the age, lad. None when I inhale. Take it all in. All in, zero out. Just a nice smell of the flower is all they have. A problem with that's then how sad to not like how a flower smells. Yeah. And it's one of the more fucking complex smelling flowers, to be fair. Like it has so many potential presentations and how it smells. And yes, it's on it. Is it this? No, that's just a long ass bong hit sound. For a sec I thought it might have been called that, but nope. I'll find it. I'll get that 420 news back up and running. I still have the old soundboard here, actually, so I could just connect this to the computer and then extract it from that. But yeah. So everybody, it's been an absolute pleasure. Gonna sign off. It's the Oireachtas Joint Drug Use Committee should be back next Thursday. If it is, I'll have a stream up scheduled to run as soon as there's a list of speakers and all of that stuff up there anyway. So until then, enjoy the rest of your week. Have a good weekend. Stay blessed. Keep her lit. Much love and peace to y'all. Toodles.